Hey, this is your host. And did you know that ketchup was once sold as medicine? Well, there's a lot of things that people have done in the name of medicine. Ketchup was first sold in the 1830s as a cure for an upset stomach. An Ohio physician named John Cook was the first to popularize this idea. He even went so far as to bottle it himself and sell it to local pharmacies. Although his recipe was supposedly based off of a Native American ketchup, whatever that is, he tweaked it a bit to include ingredients like ground mustard, which would give it a nice little kick. And this concoction was apparently quite popular in the Midwest. Cook even published an article about it in a medical journal. Now, despite its newfound popularity, it wasn't necessarily used as a condiment in the way we think of condiments today. It was more used as a folk remedy for all sorts of different ailments. In fact, many physicians at the time recommended it for all sorts of things from upset stomachs to baldness. Yeah, baldness. Now, some recipes even included opium in them. So if your bottle of ketchup didn't come with a spoon, it might have come with a little measuring device to measure out doses. That's right. You heard me right. Some bottles of ketchup came with a little measuring device to measure out your doses. The most common way to take it was to mix a tablespoon or two into a drink, although sometimes it was applied directly to the affected area. For example, in 1837, a Dr. John H. Rice wrote in the New England Journal of Medicine that he used ketchup as a liniment for lumbago. The idea was that it could help reduce inflammation and pain. Did it work? Well, who knows? But apparently he had good results with it. Now, despite its reputation as a folk remedy, ketchup wasn't necessarily looked down upon by physicians at the time. In fact, it was seen as a sort of alternative medicine, which was becoming increasingly popular in the early 1800s. This was likely due to the rise of the specialty pharmacy, which allowed for more experimentation with different products. These pharmacies were typically owned by pharmacists rather than physicians, and they allowed for more experimentation with different products. They also provided a more intimate setting for customers to discuss their ailments and receive treatment. So it was in these shops that ketchup became known as a treatment for upset stomachs. Now it wasn't just ketchup that was being sold as medicine. There were all sorts of patent medicines being marketed to consumers. These were usually a mix of different herbs and spices that were said to have medicinal properties. But unlike those products, ketchup didn't have any real scientific backing. But that didn't stop people from buying it. In fact, ketchup was so popular as a medicine that it was being counterfeited. In 1848, a Dr. Caleb Jackson wrote to the editor of the Cleveland Medical Journal to warn physicians of a new and dangerous practice. It was the custom, he said, for some unprincipled persons to adulterate or entirely replace genuine preparations with a cheap imitation. Now, while he didn't say the word ketchup, it was clear what he was talking about. This led to a number of articles being written about the dangers of taking counterfeit ketchup. Despite all the hype, though, ketchup never really took off as a medicine. It might have seemed like a good idea at the time, but in the end, it just wasn't effective. Plus, there were probably a lot of side effects from taking large amounts of it. Imagine having an upset stomach from drinking ketchup. Yikes. It wasn't until the late 19th century that ketchup really started to be used as a condiment. This was likely due to a number of factors, including the growing popularity of tomatoes and the invention of the tomato can. As tomatoes became more accessible and less expensive, they started to show up in all sorts of dishes, including ketchup. And as ketchup became more popular as a condiment, it started to appear on menus in restaurants. In fact, by the 1904 St. Louis World's Fair, it was already listed as a condiment. So there you have it. Ketchup's history as medicine is a strange one, but it's definitely an interesting part of its history. Before you put it on your burger, fries, or whatever else, take a moment to appreciate the fact that it could have been your medicine. Maybe that's why they put it in the medicine cabinet. This is your host, and until next time, stay curious.